Hello, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of JavaScript Jabber. I am Steve Edwards, the host with the face for radio and the voice for being a mime, but I'm still your host. At least I lost the coin flip today. With me on our panel is Mr. Dan Shapir, coming live from Tel Aviv. How you doing, Dan?
Hello from Tel Aviv, where we're not at war with Iran anymore. Woo!
Yes, the last time we had Dan on, I believe he had to run when bomb sirens started going off, so hopefully that won't happen today.
Yeah, missiles, not bombs, but
missiles, yeah.
But yeah.
Slightly different, same end result.
Exactly.
And our special guest today, I'm going to try to get this right, is Mr. Vinicius Dallacqua. How you doing?
Did great. Yes, doing great. Here from Sweden, where we can't decide if it's hot or not this summer. It's like one day it's hot, one day it's not.
What is Swedish hot?
It can actually get like up to like 35 degrees.
Wow, that is actually pretty hot.
That's pretty warm. That's what, around 100 Fahrenheit? Something like that?
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah, it's quite close to.
I hear that Europe is undergoing like this kind of severe heat wave.
We are, yeah. Yeah, like south of Europe is quite brutal right now. Like up to like 46 degrees or something.
Wow.
Some places.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite brutal.
That is warm.
Yeah, and not everybody has air conditioning, I guess.
No, Europe is not built for heat, I'll tell you this.
Yeah.
All right. So what we are here to talk about is the confluence of performance and AI. So actually, before we get started, we know where you live. Why don't you tell us what else you do and why people should give you money if they should and that kind of thing.
Yes. So I am a software engineer. I've been around for quite some years, as you can see from the white hairs around the hair.
Yes, I got a lot of the gray going too, so I can.
Yeah, well, and I like to say white hair is better than no hair.
Yeah.
I feel that.
I've been working for a while. I mean, being around since like I had to ship code for even like IE4.
IE4, is that what you said? Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I
can still remember those days.
I tell you. Focus on performance for the biggest part of my career. Like, although never had really like the title of like performance engineer, performance was always like the focus of my interest and career. Coming from Brazil, from central Brazil, nonetheless, where internet speeds were never up to standards. Let's say like that. Let's put it like that. So UX, performance, front end kind of became a thing for me as well, more and more over time. But performance always was a subject that I care deeply about.
Before we continue, I'm just curious. Center is like what, Manaus?
That's north actually. So central Brazil is like Tocantins, Brasilia, Goiás. So that's within the center. I was born in the north, Pará, the state, but then like my entire life I lived in Tocantins, which is central Brazil.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you bring up. A lot of developers, when they're developing apps, they get so used to their, M4 Max on their high-speed, fiber internet, and don't always think about the person who might be using their app that's in, 3G out in the middle of nowhere, something like that. Yeah. So performance like that in terms of bundle sizes for JavaScript and whether you need that much JavaScript, that's books and old topics of.
I'll tell you this, like for where I come from, the average speeds for internet is still like, around like 15 megabytes, like 100 megabytes if you're like very well off. Like it's very hard to get like a gigabyte over. It's like most people live on like 4G connection. I was actually checking out a world map for like 5G connectivity around the world. And Brazil is still like central Brazil especially. It's still very much mostly on 4G.
So back when I was working at Wix has a pretty strong presence in South America and especially in Brazil and Argentina. And that was definitely a concern about making sure that we provided a good experience in those regions. But I want to emphasize that it's not just people in certain countries. It's everybody in certain situations. I've been in airports in various places where I'm on this funky data plan and I'm trying to check my flight on an airline website and it's super slow because they're downloading this huge image of an airplane taking off that I have absolutely no need for. So, or you might be on in a subway with bad reception, or in an elevator, or I don't know where, but it's this problem of connectivity, of bad connectivity, is something that can happen to everybody in certain scenarios, and very often in the scenario where you especially need to get at that data.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it was always at the forefront of like my biggest interest and concern when I moved to Europe. Now I actually I became kind of like skewed towards the better end of connectivities, and it's very easy to build up your biases, but you can be humbled very quickly when you come to test stuff on connectivities that are spotty or unreliable. So one of the things that I always care about and used to drive wherever I work is performance. So from that, I ended up getting more into DevTools. Kind of became a thing for me. Driving performance initiatives, driving performance as a subject, also all kind of always walked hand in hand with DevTools in a way, at least for me. So it also walks hand in hand with product, which in the end brings me very close to being like a product engineer. So it kind of helps self dog food within the profession. But it brought me very close to DevTools over time. So I ended up building integrations with Lighthouses, and very early in the days where we didn't even have like proper integrations with Lighthouse, and work with this kind of things to facilitate developers' usage of dev tooling and performance tooling. And over time, it became kind of the project that I'm currently building now, which is a fork of DevTools in a way to bring kind of a different vision of how I think, not how I think, but like what could there be when it comes to DevTools that is built for the, let's say, quote unquote, the average developer. Because one of the biggest problems that I always faced, and it ended up being the reason why I ended up forking DevTools and ended up building this tool, which this tool that I say, and like the tool that I'm talking about is called PerfLab and PerfAgent, which is part of PerfLab. And the reason why I ended up building is just one of the things that ended up happening. Even like I worked at Spotify for almost 4 years. I worked at Klarna for like almost 3 years, and a very common thing was that developers either did not have as much interest to open DevTools and explore the flame graph and explore those problems, the data behind it, or they were kind of intimidated by it, even at places such as Spotify and Klarna, because it is a lot of information all at once, and it can become a very noisy tool if you're not an expert. So for me, it ended up being a way to experiment and explore how to build something that is approachable by anyone.
Yeah, so you talked really about performance, the front end. Sorry, Dan. It sounds like all yours is on the front end. You ever do any back end performance stuff, or was all your performance work pretty much been on the front end in the browser?
It's being mostly in the browser.
Yeah, because I started out with PHP, and so I can remember doing PHP profiling with like Xdebug, how you can do profiling. So there's certainly performance on the back end. I think a lot of people take performance on the back end probably for granted, because the general rule is if you can, when I'm dealing with a full stack app, I prefer PHP Vue with Inertia.js, for instance. That's one of my favorite stacks. And you can always say, if anytime you can offload stuff from the front end to the back end and get your data so that when you get to the front end, you're not doing a bunch of calculations to do that, because the assumption there is that you're going to have beefier resources on the back end in terms of your servers and stuff. And so there's probably not as much performance profiling, although I have known people who have been really big on performance profiling on the back end. But I think it's just sort of assumed, okay, your back end can handle this better because you got beefier resources back there. And so the front ends were really where we need to focus on performance stuff.
First of all, I'd like to obviously mention that we've had quite a number of people on the show in recent months talking about this topic. So if people are really interested, there's definitely a lot of shows here to check out. We've had people from Google talking specifically about building DevTools. We had I think I'm not mixing his name up, talking about React profiling, the tools that he built for that. We've had Harry Roberts. So we've had a lot of people talking about these subjects. So there's definitely a lot to if people are interested, there's definitely a lot of content here on the podcast about it. But going specifically to your point, Steve, it's tricky because very often it is about the backend because it might be just simply an SQL query that's not properly optimized or doesn't have the appropriate indexes defined and runs way too slowly and something like that. But on the other hand, your backend could be really, really well optimized, but it's worthless because, as I gave an example before, you're downloading a huge image and that's just eating up all your bandwidth, regardless of anything else that you're doing. So you really kind of need to take a holistic view of performance and try to pinpoint the root causes and identify bottlenecks. And that's usually what dev tooling is for identifying those and understanding what to focus on and doing the proper attribution of locating the areas that are most problematic.
Exactly. And it's really like that's one of the main reasons why performance is such a difficult subject, right? Like to become, let's say, an expert or even like someone that is confident to solve performance problems is a very steep vertical. The tooling can be somewhat intimidating if you never, delve deep into it or dedicated the hours for it. And for experienced developers or specialists, what is information can be noise for, let's say, the average developer that doesn't go around on DevTools as much. So with that premise, I was interested on experimenting around and seeing, what I could come up with. So I ended up forking Chrome DevTools. The advantage of Chrome DevTools, first of all, the source code is beautifully documented. So self-onboarding on it very easily was very easy. And it is web components with TypeScript. So it's actually web technology. So it's really approachable for the average developer out there.
Yeah, who would have thought that web dev tooling is built on web technologies like Inception?
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of people think it's C++, right? Like because the browser, the main Chrome is C++, the main interface. So a lot of people actually end up thinking it is C++, which is not the case. It's built on top of web technologies, but it communicates through the browser via the debugging protocol, and it communicates also via the different protocols within the native layer. I ended up forking it, and the first try around was building PerfLab as in the main, let's say the main app. And PerfLab was a fork of the performance panel. So extracting it as a standalone web component, it is already built on web components. So extracting it was not as hard. And what ended up happening that I noticed is that because I still used the performance panel as the main interface to drive interactions around, it ended up being something very close to like a dashboard. And one of the things that I constantly had a gripe with is that dashboards can be also very daunting and sub-utilized. Like a lot of dashboard systems and SaaS companies have really good product, but it's heavily underutilized because people don't understand the data. They don't understand what they want to extract out of the data, end up subutilizing the systems. So it ended up being not as, friendly for early stage developers or developers that don't have performance as their main forte, let's say, the main subject.
It's interesting that this is something that Google themselves have realized, like that the performance tab is really daunting. It's a very busy interface with a ton of information, and they actually created an alternative tab. I think it was called Performance Insights or something like that, which was, as we've been told on the show, never intended to be like a long-term solution. Rather, it was this kind of a playground where they were testing out various alternative ideas that they thought that they will eventually bring back into the main performance tab. So kind of a playground to try out various optimizations and way of making the interface clearer and easier to understand, especially to junior developers.
And the Chrome team has been on an absolute roll when it comes to improving the experience around DevTools in general. So my next, adventure with building something with DevTools was, I think, about like 3 years ago. No, sorry, about a year and a half ago. So when AI in general became more broadly like a part of the common discourse, we started having better developer frameworks for building with AI and stuff like that. So I was like, and everyone was building their own chatbots in a way. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna see if I can build something that is approachable for anyone. And so, like, I remember being, I think it was last year's Perf Now, talking with the different people from the DevTools.
And for those who don't know, by the way, Performance Now is probably the leading performance-related conference. Takes place in Amsterdam, so that's actually fairly close to you.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be there this year as well. I'm gonna be actually talking this year.
Oh, cool.
Yes, it's on a very similar subject. So this is kind of like a teaser, let's say, a long form teaser of the talk. But so within last year's Perf Now, I brought up with different members of the DevTools teams, like kind of like let's say a thought exercise of what could it be that the smallest possible subset of a dev tool looks like, and helps people engage with it without being daunting. So this was kind of like the thought exercise I was trying to have within those conversations, and a lot of things. And I was demoing PerfLab within Perf Now as well, gathering some talks and discussions around the tool I was building. So early this year, I decided to build PerfAgent. So with PerfAgent, I started with the same kind of spirit of PerfLab, forking part of Chrome DevTools. So without going too much into details, so we have some parts of the DevTools. There are the drivers of how DevTools reads and trace information. So that trace engine is something that I then extracted. So instead of going for the main performance panel, I extracted the trace engine to help me extract information out of traces. And with that, create my own agent that can understand traces and try to help people to solve performance problems. So in a way, I ended up building a chatbot in a way. But some of the things I was trying to play with is, of course, with the advent of generative UI, build that thought process of what is the smallest possible subset of a dev tool that I can build that is progressive, and which means it doesn't present all the information at once. So it tries to be more friendly, also like a knowledge assistant, and helps with solving performance problems, building on top of AI agents that can understand, trace files and can understand call stacks and all this kind of stuff and help you solve problems.
So just to understand, you're building this as an open source project, as a service, as a product that you intend to sell, as all of the above? What is it?
It's a very good question. I'm building it. It's going to be open source like within the next couple of weeks. I'm just cleaning up parts of the code and making sure that it's in a good state to be open sourced and collaborated with more people, because it's been just me so far, long evenings and whatnot. But it is also up of PerfLab, so people can they can join the waitlist, and I'm slowly getting people onboarded into the service, mostly because it's just me. So inference cost is a thing as well. One of the biggest thing with AI is inference cost. So I'm gonna come up with probably some form of pricing model, or hopefully sponsorship to keep it free or whatever. But I don't have any. I didn't have necessarily like any big plans for it, because it's built on top of open source, and like most of the tools I use nowadays is kind of, let's say, common ground. It used to be more the secret sauce, as people say, where the system prompts, how you organize the workflow and how you organize the tools used to be a big part of differentiates one AI tool from another. But as everyone pretty much started doing this, it became less important, so much to a lot of different companies open source their system prompts and how they're building workflows and things like that. Even VS Code now with Copilot is open source, the system prompts, that is. So
I'll ask my question in a slightly different way. Is this your day job?
No, it's not. No, it's not my day job. It's a good question. It's been a passion project. It's been evenings and weekends building this stuff, because now we live in a very interesting point in time where there is this inflection point kind of coming. And I feel like as a developer, as an engineer, I'm naturally curious, and I feel like it's one of the things that a good engineer is that natural curiosity to try stuff and see where they fit within your workflow. But I did not want to just be a consumer. I also wanted to build something with it. So I ended up studying some, even deeper ends of models, model platform architectures, and how to train models, the whole stuff. So much so that actually, as a side thing, I ended up building the workflow to kind of simulate the mixture of experts architecture, where you have like a router that delegates to different workflows and different specialists. Because the whole, if you think about performance, as we just opened up the show, it has different subjects, right? And that's one of the biggest challenge of building a system, an AI system with a complex subject such as performance, because it's very deep and also has different branches that all of them go very deep. And Google kind of like, if you go digging around the DevTools source code, you will see that they're using kind of the same approach, where they have AI agents that represent different parts of the DevTools. You have one for the network, one for call frames, one for CSS, one for elements. So it's a very similar way, but then within the whole thing that I built is it has like a router that will understand the request and navigate workflows and different specialists to call within the two chain. But it's a very interesting inflection point that we're going to have in the next few years, and experimenting with it. It felt like almost like an obligation to me to understand where do all of us fit in within this next few years as a developer. Where does the web even fit in? Because one of the things that I started thinking a lot about is, and that's ended up being the reason why I ended up building PerfAgent, is what is a dev tool in this new era when you have agents kind of talking to each other, solving problems. So last week we had IO Connect, and for IO Connect, one of the things that I wanted to do for IO Connect is to see if so I built a quick hack over the weekend just before IO Connect, where I created an MCP server built inside of DevTools. So the purpose of that is because I already built the agent tool that understands traces and can solve problems, but you have to handle traces. So now MCP is all the hype and all this kind of stuff. So I wanted to see how can DevTools, how can a browser adopt those new things, right? So I started with DevTools and DevTools. So I built an MCP server within DevTools, so it connects to Cloud Code, to Cursor, whatever is your AI editor of choice, and it connects through MCP. So what happens is that within the agent, what you can do is you just have it, ask it to like go fire trace and then get insights, and it creates this self-healing loop. Because as people nowadays have this kind of tools to build stuff, and it's more approachable than ever for people to prompt their way into building an app. Now, as we all know, it doesn't build the most correct way. It works, but at what cost? We don't know yet. So that's kind of the next step, right? Instead of, let's see how would it work within that kind of workflow.
So it's kind of like within Cursor, I could theoretically tell it like, here's my code, make it faster. And
yes,
it would try to optimize it and then run it through DevTools, get back some data, make modifications, run it again, and see whether it's improving or regressing, stuff like that.
Yeah, and even like it can even fix actual points within your code, because I hooked the same internals. So within DevTools, I hooked the same internals that I used to build my agent within the trace engine. So when the MCP server is called from Cursor and say, okay, record a trace, and record, of course, the trace, and then it has another tool that will say, okay, now give me the insights. So we will connect to the server will return actual insights with like a prompt to guide, like this is what I see on the call trace, and it will return a full-on prompt to guide Cursor on what to patch, what to fix, and Cursor can self-execute and improve the code based on that. So connecting straight into DevTools.
So what have you seen this kind of system be able to achieve? What kind of improvements have you seen it make?
I have, just before I built this, and as a thought exercise, I introduced a very big problem with inputs. So I purposely made the INP metric worse. So without telling Cursor exactly what I built or what I'd done, I just said, okay, go fire DevTools via the MCP server and fix whatever problem you face. You see in there. And it did precisely that. If from the call stack and the prompt that DevTools returned back to it, it was able to find within the code what was the problem and fix it. So it can really create this like self-healing loop within an MCP connection straight into DevTools. So this is the kind of experimentation that I'm very interested on now, on like what is DevTools in this new era of agents, and how is a browser to behave as an agent with agents, and how can both browsers and DevTools embrace this and move forward with this new generation of developers? Because it's one of the things that that I'm constantly talking with different people from DevTools team, outside of the DevTools team, is like, how can we ensure that the web as a platform can adapt and thrive within this new self paradigms on agentic? You see Perplexity is building their own browser. You see OpenAI is not openly developing, but they are developing their own browser. And
I wasn't aware.
They've been poaching, so they are certainly building their own browser. And you have Dia from the browser company up there. And here in Stockholm, we have a browser company called Strawberry, which I ended up hooking up with them and talking with them because they're very local. So I wanted to talk with them. But they also have an agentic browser. So agentic browsers is something that we keep hearing about.
And
right?
and by agentic browser, do you mean something that instead of the actual website, it reads the website and then presents me with its own version, as it were, of the website that's more appropriate for my particular needs and wants? Is that what it does? What does it do exactly?
That is a good point. Like, I don't think there's a definition yet. So when it comes to agentic browser nowadays, if you take, for example, Dia, if you take Comet, which is coming up soon as well for open access. For what I have seen is a browser with an agent panel, like with a chatbot on the side. So you can either extract information out of a web page or you can automate some things, but it's not yet entirely what you said. Although
that seems kind of anticlimactic.
For now, it is, but it's definitely. I feel like every developer out there is seeking that next iteration of what you said. I myself have written a sort of like an essay that's pinned into my X page, which is about what you just said on what is a browser to be when in the age of agents, right? What are we to be? Because if you consider the following premise on, and when we're going to go back to performance in a minute, because it kind of builds up to that. So if you consider the current premise of nowadays, a lot of people are automating more and more in regards to what they do on the web with OpenAI's chat or Claude or anything as such. And what they get in return is a markdown. So there is a natural evolution of that. And you see Kenzie Dodds driving MCP UI, or rather the capabilities of MCP rendering UI, which ended up being like us embedding micro interfaces as response to agents. There's a lot of discussion within the web on what is going to be, or what is the possibility, not necessarily like what is going to be. What is the possibility of us interacting with the web in this kind of agentic workflows?
So, for example, these days, when you ask Google a question, their response, their reaction to what OpenAI did, when you ask Google a question, in many cases, instead of just returning a list of links of possible pages, they use Gemini to generate an answer for you.
Yes.
It's not a huge leap. And by the way, in many cases, if that answer is actually good enough, then that's it. You don't actually go to any page. You just use that answer that Google provided.
Yeah.
Well, it's theoretically not a huge leap to think of a scenario where they literally generate a website on the fly that provides the exact information you ask for, not just as text, but has a holistic website with images, with menus, with an interface that's specific to you and your use case and your query at that point in time. It's not such a huge leap.
No, it's not. So much so that I feel like it's kind of converging. A lot of people are converging to something similar. I feel like from within the Chrome team, I know Paul Killen is writing a lot about his thoughts on what is the future of the platform around agents and things like that. He has this website called AI Focus, where he writes a lot of his insights. He's been around for a long time as well. He's one of the most respected names out there when it comes to the platform and DevTools. So he's been writing a lot of insights that converge to similar theories and similar places where you are arriving, where I have arrived. Can't see dots. I see the remix guys are arriving at the same kind of points as well. So there is a lot of convergence, and it's up to the platform, of course, to ensure that there are good primitives out there that provides this kind of experience. And I actually, I was joking with Malte from CTO of Vercel, in passing, that they should have an MCP for V0, because it kind of enables experiences like that, right? If you have a browser that can connect to different MCPs, and you can use different services to generate, because it end up being a taste thing, right? Some people would prefer this model over that model. Some people would prefer this AI generator over that AI generator. And it's about providing the right primitives in the end to access this kind of things. But one of the things that I was discussing, getting back to the performance part of the subject, is after I shared that AI, the map for 5G connectivity of the world, one of the things one of the insights that I get nowadays is, since a lot of the web traffic is being diverted away from websites, and because it's so much is being done via different workflows within different agents, either OpenAI or Anthropic or what have you, what ends up happening is that a lot of that traffic is not within their mobile iPhone anymore, because what they get in return is a markdown with some images. In a way, if you think about it, I don't think that's the end result for us. The web should be rich and full of experience. But as an interim, as a thought process, or at least a thought provocation, is that's actually better if you have lower connectivity, right? It's kind of what Google tried to provide with, was it Google Sites or
no? What was it called? I know what you're talking about.
I don't remember the name as well. It escapes me now.
Yeah, exactly the same.
But those like read only or read mode for websites. But you have, because Markdown is so much faster to render, it kind of ends up being a good experience for people that lives in poor connectivity, because they get the information they want, they can get things done without having to pay heavy.
Yeah, but on the other hand, there are two problems with it. First of all, well, you still have that model generating the response on the fly, yes, which is obviously much slower than a pre-prepared response, and also much more expensive to generate. Certainly consumes a lot more energy. So a world where every query for everybody is answered with a page that's generated specifically for that person, we might get there eventually, but it's certainly not, it's not going to improve the performance of the initial load. Let's put it this way.
No, so without getting too much into the economics of it, there is, of course, those scaling problems. But my thought on this is purely on the platform level, on what kind of experiences are we going to end up having. One of the things that I'm very much interested on thinking about nowadays is kind of, now that we are capable of generating interfaces on the fly. There is a nuance to that, of course, but we are capable of eliminating quite a lot of noise from the UI, from the interfaces. We don't have to generate static menus and sidebar with lots of options and deep nested menus, things like that. So we now can generate a much simpler, much more concise interface, and progressively introduce the users or nudge the users towards different levels of information. So both for DevTools, I feel like that's a great thing, because you can lower the threshold, lower the barrier for entry for developers, building something that is more approachable at first. And you can, of course, dig deeper with different workflows. And also for websites, what would that mean in the end?
So, putting aside the bigger issue of what's the future of the web going to be, and moving back to the quote unquote simpler issue of dev tooling and performance tooling. So, you said you build an MCP server that's integrated into DevTools, and then you can get information out of DevTools into something like Cursor or something like that as actionable data. What else are you thinking about in the context of the future of performance tooling?
I feel like performance tooling, Google, if you observe what Google is doing within the DevTools, I'm kind of hoping on using a lot of that work to power the other experiences I'm building around it. It is a lot on providing hints and providing knowledge assistance, providing debugging assistance. So there is different, of course, experiences and levels you can dig. So you can have something that is more approachable, or not approachable rather, but like something that is more active. So it's actively trying to help you, or something that's going to be requested. Like currently on DevTools, you hover or you right click to activate the AI insights. Some of the insights are being delivered actively, but there are different experiences you can try to gauge. I'm trying to lean on the experiences that are more actively helping people, or trying to deliver something that is more actively trying to help people, trying to be more knowledge assistant at the same time as a tool that can help you solve actual problems, performance problems.
So one of the things I recall hearing about, though, to be perfectly honest, I've not actually had a chance to try it out and see how good it is I recall they've been talking about using local Gemini to analyze the stack traces in the flame chart.
Yes.
And provide better understanding. Like for those of you who, like what I said sounds like gobbledygook, when you record performance session, when you record the performance of a session in the Chrome DevTools Performance tab, one of the things that it does is that it analyzes JavaScript execution over time and basically checks at every point in time what the stack trace looks like, and basically maps the progress of execution through the actual application code.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you get is called often a flame chart because it uses different colors, so it looks kind of like a fire. And if the stack is deep, then you see a lot of boxes, but if it's shallow, then you see fewer, and you can kind of follow along and see where execution spent its time, which method got called very often, which methods or functions took a long time to process, etc. When were you blocked maybe on a network operation, etc., etc. And those flame charts are sometimes difficult to analyze because, again, they represent a ton of information in a very condensed sort of a way. So if you can get better hinting and suggestions about what it means, like, okay, but what does this function actually do? That could be very helpful. But I've not actually checked the quality of information that it provides. I guess that you've been playing with it quite a bit. What do you think about it?
So I'm actually using a lot of the internals that they are using to provide that. Aside, of course, the onboard Gemini model that they have on Chrome, I am using Gemini, but the hosted version for that, both Flash and Pro, and 2.5 Flash and 2.5 Pro for different kind of things. But to answer the crux of the matter, it's getting really good. Right now, it still struggles with some form of directions, but that's mostly on prompting. So one of the things that I did, I use most of the same prompting that the Chrome DevTools uses for Gemini to analyze a flame graph. But the things I differentiate is that I'm trying to drive it to be a bit more direct when it comes to offering suggestions that are what's next to do. So, for instance, I used kind of the same. It's pretty much the same prompt, but what difference is the prompt I'm using is in some different parts of prompt engineering of how I want the model to be more decisive, and I also want to teach the model. For instance, when it's analyzing a bundle from Next.js, it will know. When it's analyzing a bundle that comes from different kind of frameworks, it will know, and it will try to give you a bit more decisive actions. Like, okay, I see that this kind of call frames are coming from this asset, which is a framework asset. So you kind of have a framework logic there where you can try to fix. So it's trying to be a bit more directed towards giving you an answer. And then I use the same model. I use the same kind of prompts for the MCP tool, which kind of helps Cursor also be more decisive on fixing stuff.
So again, can you give a concrete example of some practical results or outcomes that you've seen from this type of operation?
Right now, it's kind of in between. It's a bit of a hit and miss. It can be a bit of a hit and miss. But the tools
like all
are
AI.
naturally. It can be a little bit of a hit and miss. But the tools are evolving quite a lot, and with more prompt engineering, with more data collection, understanding eval, like having better evals, it will only get better. So there is definitive value, especially for people that are trying to understand the flame graph. The AI ask within DevTools, the agent I'm building can be tools that will help you understand things better and hopefully give you insights. So the mileage may vary, of course, but over time it will only get better.
So aside from the MCP connectivity, again, what else are you building?
So right now I'm focusing again. I did this MCP as a thought process because I can't ship the MCP that I built, unfortunately, because I built straight into DevTools. So I can't ship my own version of DevTools within Chrome. But I actually am going to continue exploring because I was talking with the DevTools team. The next things could be like to have a tool that can use the debugging protocol to drive different kind of scenarios. Let's say now the agent can also execute. Let's say you ask the agent, can you please measure the interaction when you click this button and try to fix any performance problems? So instead of you manually going to the browser and recording that trace, the agent can do that for you and return with the insights and the prompts that will help it fix the next stage, right? So that's kind of like it became a thought process that I want to try to execute on, to see how can you make the browser respond to as a dev tool to an agentic flow. So that's something that I'm looking to experiment with next. But when it comes to shipping within within PerfLab, the next thing for me is helping the agent to understand more of the performance as a subject. So because right now what I've built is Web Vitals insights. So it understands different parts of the Web Vitals and it can generate quite good, insightful reports on how to fix different problems from the Web Vitals that it sees within the trace. But then next for me is the network, getting better insights for the network. So it does LCP, so kind of has the network agent there, but I want to build better network agents to understand server timings, understand this kind of other subjects within the workflow, and help with different subjects within performance, because there is a lot more things to fix. And then alongside of that, bake in a memory layer. So the agent can remember how to fix the problems, and it gets a bit more proactive on fixing problems, understanding what problems he's seen before and what kind of fixes he's seen before with the memory layer. So I'm interested on seeing how the agent starts to self-evolve in a way when you start introducing a memory layer to solve performance problems.
So a couple of thoughts or suggestions even about that. So first of all, it seems to me, based on the workflow that you're describing, that integration with something like Playwright might be a more natural evolution than trying to coerce Chrome to record kind of headless sessions or sessions that don't involve actual user interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're literally automating the web in order to perform agentic operations.
Yes, and I would go one step further because I know Playwright. I've used it for a long time, but I've been experimenting with, and I actually been in contact briefly with the people from BrowserBase and Stagehand. So they have this kind of really good automation for the browser. One thing that I'm going to actually check with them that I plan to check with them is how much of the dev tools do they have access to. Because as far as I know, within the debugging protocol, it does not really have access to, yet at least, does not have access to some of the AI insights. So the way I'm driving the MCP server experiment that I'm running locally is all based on the AI insights. And those are internal to DevTools. So I'm leveraging those AI insights, the same that Google is surfacing for the Ask AI within DevTools, to create a loop with cursor to this self-healing mode for developers that are either vibe coding or even developers that don't necessarily know how to fix performance problems. So within the debugging protocol, you don't necessarily have access to that kind of stuff. You can drive a headless browser, or a browser session autonomously, but what I'm interested in is less on the driving the session autonomously, but more on getting access to those internals to get the information out of the telemetry I get to give back within an MCP server to Cursor or any AI editor to solve problems autonomously. So it's less about driving the web autonomously, but more about fixing things autonomously based on the telemetry I can get from DevTools. So that's kind of what's
but
next
you're
for me.
doing these kind of loops where I guess
Yes.
where you're trying a certain, well, you're not you, the agent, the model is trying a certain optimization and then checks to see whether it actually improves or degrades the actual performance.
Yes.
Or more
Yes,
often
for
than
that
not,
kind of
probably doesn't
stuff.
make any difference at all.
Yes. So for that kind of stuff, you can use different services for sandboxing. There's many like Daytona or actually Vercel has released one recently. So you can use a sandboxing service where you can hook up to like an automated session to test actual fixes. But then for me, there is that part that of course I will experiment with within PerfLab. But I'm also interested on the reason why I'm playing with internals, DevTools, and MCP integration within DevTools and different kind of experimentation within the browser space is kind of to play with this next version of browsers, DevTools, and the web in general on how they would look like or can look like rather. Because as I think it was I don't remember who said it, but we are one really good UX away from a complete shift on how we think about interfaces or the web in general. So there's a lot of experimentation that can be had and should be had. So this is kind of where I'm navigating nowadays.
Yeah, I heard that quote recently too. I want to say it was Wes Boss, but yeah, I've heard
it. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if it was Wes or someone else, but I have a feeling it was someone from those circles.
Yeah, I heard that same quote earlier this week. So yeah, I know what you're
I'm really wary about the web becoming something generated by agents for agents.
There is a layer. So there is layers to that. And I share, so I will repeat AI Focus from Paul Killen. Like if you haven't read it yet, it's really, really good. But there are those fears of like when it comes to publishers, monetization, experiences, like the excessive, maybe excessive automation is an actual concern. It's a very valid one. But one thing that I'm kind of looking forward to is for personalization, for enabling what people are calling the personal web. So in a way, we're kind of going back to GeoCities, where people just put silly websites that they just wanted to build and built like that. That's why I see tools like Lovable, like V0 as kind of us returning to that ingenuity and accessibility of people creating what they want and putting things out there. So of course, there are different challenges, both on a social aspect, on an economical aspect, on an environmental aspect that we should not be blinded to. But there is also a lot of good that can be had.
One more thing that I wanted to suggest to you, especially if you're looking at memory. By the way, I was supposed to give a talk at a conference here in Tel Aviv in Israel on using heap dumps to analyze performance issues in Node rather than in the browser. I think, and that's the point, I think that Node is a great candidate for these types of analysis operations as well. If, in fact, optimizing Node operations in many ways is even more difficult than optimizing browser operations.
That is true.
And it's effectively a lot of the same processes and the same APIs and the same protocols.
Yes,
so
that is
solutions true. That can be applied to the browser can be, well, obviously they would need to be somewhat modified, but can generally be applied to Node as well.
Yes. So for backend is something that is very much in my head. We have server timings, which I wrote about. One of the things that I love about modern day tooling is that we have things like INP and LOAF. Animation frames, I believe, is one of the best APIs released in the modern times for JavaScript or the web performance in general. I've talked about it this year at JS Nation, last year, and something that I really like. But when it comes to backend, at least surfacing.
So before you proceed, can you elaborate on that a little bit? What you mean by that, those APIs?
So INP, Interaction to Next Paint, is a relatively new API made into Chrome Web Vitals as an official metric as of March this year. And it's driven by an internal metric called animation frame. And the animation frame is where you aggregate different sections of work that the browser needs to produce in order to ship the next frame. So that's why you have long animation frames or low AF as an API to fetch animation frames that are with a timing larger than 50 milliseconds, which is the well-known, or at least is the standardized metric for long tasks.
Yeah, it just to add a little bit of context or information, it actually comes from the other way around. Basically, in order to provide a good visual experience, jank-free experience on displays, you usually want to achieve something like 60 FPS or 60 frames per second. And when you divide 60, and when you check how long you have to actually work on each frame in order to achieve 60 FPS, you see that it's 16 point something milliseconds per frame. So that's where it comes from. Now, given that the browser itself needs to do a little bit of work itself, it leaves you with 14 or 15 milliseconds to do whatever it is that you want to do. And whenever you exceed that, you get jank because you cause the browser to drop below that 60 FPS. And by the way, it's worth noting that on high-end displays and on 3D displays, you actually, like if you're using something like smart glasses, you actually want to hit 120 FPS.
Exactly. It's
which is even harder.
Which leaves you even less work window. I actually have a talk in my like, Dan, about the background from where did we come from to where we are now in regards to interactivity metrics. I've long animation frames. The name now escapes me, but I did last year at React Advanced, and I also did in person for the Mozilla meetup at PerfNow the same day. So I think you're going to enjoy. I'm going to share the link with you.
No, for sure.
After the show.
And probably also, if it's public, we can share it.
It is public, yeah.
In the show notes for this. By the way, what I would suggest to you, if you're interested in these things, is also participate in the 3C Web Performance Working Group, where we generally talk about all these metrics and how we can improve them and evolve them. But again, coming back to what we were talking about, so you're talking about this API that can measure and see when you're exceeding the allotted time for frames, resulting in a janky user interface or in a somewhat non-responsive user interface.
Yes. So animation frames, the reason why I love it so much is within both PerfLab and PerfAgent, I created histograms using animation frames to show you activity, like processing activity based on the different Web Vitals thresholds. But the reason why I like it so much is that it aggregates within one common namespace or metric all the different problems that can happen for you that might lead to jank. So you have processing time, input delay, and presentation delay, all of which have different subset of problems that may impact the different subsections. So my talk this year at JS Nation is about that. But the reason why I love it so much is that it makes the conversation a bit more productive, because it gathers within one common metric, it gathers all different aspects of shipping a frame instead of just focusing on processing or just focusing on style and layout. So it's really, really good and makes the conversation a bit more productive. The reason why I use it so much and moving back into the backend is because thinking about this kind of metric and work, what I'm going to end up doing for PerfLab and PerfAgent to teach agents how to deal with backend is then zoom out into OTel and spans in general, right? So it's about building attribution based on spans and building attribution based on server timings, OTel spans. So it is one of those things that I'm curious to try on extrapolating.
So spans like OpenTelemetry spans?
Yeah, exactly. So trying to build this kind of attribution, like we use the same, because I feel like for the front end, we have so much work done to standardize set of timings and build this kind of aggregation of data to better understand performance problems. And we could leverage some of this knowledge or some of this, at least, way of thinking to build automation for processing times on or OTel spans, or just serving stuff via server timings can be also a great deal of help.
You should be speaking with Matteo Colina and the other guys.
I did speak with him at JS Nation this year, so I'm curious to bring more conversations about this stuff with him, because I know he's very interested. I've shared PerfLab with him, so let's see what can be done with that.
And before we finish, what are your future thoughts? Like, where are you thinking about taking this tool? What are you thinking about in terms of new technologies and new approaches?
So for me, right now, I'm going to be open sourcing it in the next couple of weeks. And it's going to be available for as Apache 2. And anyone that wanted to collaborate, of course, is more than welcome to. And I'm curious to see what kind of collaborations comes out of the open sourcing of it. The tool for me is a way of expressing my thoughts and my feeling towards how I feel like DevTools can evolve, or not evolve, but like how could they be embracing AI first, or taking the subject of AI aside, is how to build something that is approachable for people that are not as technical, and trying to remove all of those natural barriers that people keep bringing up when it comes to DevTools, which I feel like DevTools is such a great tool. But for me, I'm used to DevTools. I've been using it for more than a decade by now. And it's something that is kind of second nature. But I'm very acutely aware of working with different teams of different knowledge levels. That's not the case for every developer out there. And we can be trying to, force a square peg into a circle, and just tell them like you should learn DevTools, which they should, if I'm being honest. But then the approach may have varying success to different people, especially on what their interests are. So building something that can be the smallest subset of a DevTool, building more progressive and approachable for people of all knowledge levels, is something I'm curious to. And also evolving from the DevTools on to the browsers space as well, which is where I'm growing deeply more interested on experimenting with. How can a browser be a better agent, and how can agents interact better with browsers is something that I'm experimenting with nowadays.
Something that might be really interesting to look at, and in a certain way both simultaneously easier and more difficult, is thinking about how to optimize not necessarily the JavaScript, but the CSS.
Yes.
People underestimate the impact that CSS, especially modern sophisticated CSS, can have on rendering performance.
Mm-hmm.
And in general, I find that developers are a lot less familiar with the intricacies of CSS. And CSS seems like something that should be handled by AI. Anything in that context would be really helpful. So being able to play around with the CSS and see how that impacts performance sounds something that could be really, really interesting.
Yes, absolutely. And there is a lot of value on getting, knowledge assistance and also automation based on things that developers consider either bootstrappy or hard to approach. So that there is a good mix where we can experiment with and build good experiences around. And this is kind of where I'm very curious to experiment with.
So if you're going to be releasing this as open source, where will people be able to find it?
So from my X handle, you have the links. It's the live versions is agent.perflab.io. That's where you have the agent, and then perflab.io is where you have, let's say, the legacy one, where it's not legacy, it's live and it will be, but that's let's say the first version. The agent is where I'm focusing most of my time nowadays to experiment with, and both agent and perflab will be fully open source in the coming weeks, but the services are going to still stay up. And I mean, I'm constantly going to be writing about it on X and Blue Sky as well, so you can always catch up there.
All right. So with that, we are a little over time, so we're going to start wrapping things up. So if people want to follow you and give you money and give you accolades and all those kinds of things, where are the best places to find you?
So on X, I am web Twitter. So the Twitter is TWITR. So it's a little.
Is that the Web 2.0 spelling of Twitter? I think is what
kind
that is.
of. Yeah, because I built right around that.
You should have changed it to WebX or something.
There you go.
I tried to use WebX because by the time I built I got my Twitter account, I used WebX everywhere, but WebX was taken already. So that's why I ended up using Web Twitter.
There's a company called WebX, I think.
Exactly. I think there is. That sounded familiar as soon as you said that.
So web Twitter, TWITR on X, and on Blue Sky I am WebX. at Blue Sky. Sure. So inconsistencies. Maybe I should try to find some new personal branding to try and like consolidate into this namespace.
Look at Harry Roberts, who stuck with CSS wizardry.
Harry is very fortunate to have one consistent naming on every socials. What a legend! But yeah, so you can find me. I mean, I believe if you look it up for Vinicius Dallacqua on Twitter or Blue Sky, there will be very little. It's fingers crossed. It's not such a common name, I think.
That's right. Well, you have an interesting combination. I think beforehand you were telling us the name was Italian, so you're a Brazilian with an Italian name, living in Sweden, right?
Name. Exactly. Living in Sweden, married to a British woman. So it's,
wow, that's 4 levels of internationalism right there.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
Phenomenal. Alrighty, so with that, we'll move to picks. Picks are the part of the show where we can talk about anything we want within reason that doesn't get us fined. And tech or non-tech related. Chuck's not here, so we probably will not get our board game fix this weekend, but never fear, he will be back next week. He's celebrating his 20th wedding anniversary with his wife this week.
Wow.
So,
good for Chuck.
So that's why he's not here. I'll start. My picks are generally at least I consider them the high point of any episode with dad jokes. But before I get to the dad jokes of the week, I'll pick a couple interesting posts that I saw today on Hacker News. And in light of the conversation we just had about AI, Cloudflare, which we know is a tool that a lot of people use for deploying apps or for shielding or, for any number of services. They are introducing, this is an article in the New York Times, they're introducing a default blocking of AI data scrapers. One of the uses one of the uses of AI obviously is sending a tool to go out and beat the crap out of websites and get all their data off. And websites don't like that so much. So they're providing that option. Also is Figma, which is a very, very popular tool for design and any number of things. They had I don't remember the reason for why it failed. Dan, maybe you can refresh my memory where they were going to get bought by Adobe and then it fell apart.
Yeah, because of the DOJ.
It was antitrust, right? It was
antitrust or monopoly or something along these lines.
Right. So they are filing for an IPO. They are going to go public and try to make up for the $9 billion that they didn't get from Adobe and get money this way. Interesting to see how that goes. And now to the dad jokes of the week. So let me see, where was I at? Oh yeah, the other day, this is what not to do if you're married. My wife said for our anniversary, she wanted me to take her to one of those restaurants where they make all the food in front of you. It's really good and you got the chef right there and everything. I said, sure. So I took her to Subway. Right. Subway is a sub sandwich shop where they make it right in front of you if you're not aware of that. Here's a conversation. The devil is saying, this is the lake of lava you will be spending eternity in. Me. Actually, since we're underground, that would be magma. The devil says, you do understand this is why you're here, right? Right?
Yeah.
And then for you Leslie Nielsen fans, he was amazing comedian. I went to the doctor and the doctor told me, you have cancer, but we can treat it. I said, what's the cure? He says, the Cure is a British rock band fronted by Robert Smith, but let's try to stay focused.
Yeah. Anybody who's ever seen the movie
Airplane,
it's full of these types of jokes.
Hospital. Yeah. That's a large building with lots of patients, but that's not important right now.
Exactly.
Yeah. Dan, what do you got for us for picks?
Not so much in the way of picks. I mentioned before, happy to say that at least the war with Iran seems to be over, at least for now. Hopefully the other wars that we're currently experiencing will be ending soon and not soon enough. We will see. But those are not my picks. So I obviously have opinions on politics, geopolitics, and stuff like that. I don't share them on the podcast, obviously. I don't share them on X so much either, because X is, from my perspective, is intended for more of the technical aspects of what I'm involved in. But if anybody is interested in my views on, like I said, politics, geopolitics, diplomacy, war, whatever, all the soft stuff, also some tech stuff, but also a lot of the soft stuff, you can find that on Quora, where I post and I don't put up questions. I don't think I've ever actually put up a question, but I do post a lot of answers, and I've actually gotten a lot of views. So I've got, over the years, I've gotten over 6 million views. I've been a top writer on several occasions and on several topics and in general. So if anybody is interested in that part of my life, just go into Quora and search for Dan Shapir and see what I think and see if it matches your opinions on stuff. All good, whether you agree or disagree.
That's
And
interesting. I can remember Quora being a thing way back. I didn't know it was still a thing, to be honest, Dan. Don't take that for what it's worth, but I didn't realize it was out there.
I don't stock, but I do get tens of thousands of views there on a weekly basis. So apparently people are still using it. I actually also think that AI agents use it a lot because it's information that's easily accessible and usable and rankable by the various AI tools. So so like Wikipedia, it's a source of information for a lot of these agents.
Interesting.
But anyway, be that as it may, that's my pick for today.
All righty. And finally, we'll save the best for last. Vinicius, you got any picks for us?
Yes. So said a couple of times, AI Focus from Paul Kinnan. Really good read if you're trying to wrap your head around, this higher level concepts, how the platform can play or has played this long game. It's really good information in general. But on a non-technical one, for tomorrow, we're actually going to have the second season of Sandman on Netflix. As an avid reader of the graphic novel and someone who really enjoyed season 1, I'm looking forward to that big time.
Sandman?
Yeah.
No, not familiar with that one.
Sandman, despite Neil Gaiman's fall from grace, it's still considered a very good read.
It's a brilliant read. Sandman.
Separating the artist from the art, as it were.
Yeah. Well, Sandman is a brilliant read. The show is really, really good as well. The season 1 and season 2 is coming up soon, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, season 1 was good. I enjoyed season 1.
Yeah.
All righty. So with that, we will wrap up this episode of JavaScript Jabber. Thank you to Vinicius for joining us from Stockholm.
My pleasure.
And hopefully we've piqued your interest in AI and DevTools, which I have to admit was a combination I had not thought of before today. Thanks, Dan, for joining us. And we will talk at you next time on JavaScript Jabber.
Bye.
Bye-bye.